Last night I had the actor's nightmare for the first time in a long time, a version of it anyway. In the dream, I was back at the Walker Art Center where I worked as chief guard on and off for several years. I was on my way to Gallery 7, but I couldn't find it. Neither David Hockney nor Yoko Ono were any help at all, though it was nice to see them again. Search though I might, Gallery 7 proved elusive. Eventually, my rational mind grumbled to the surface and declared, "This is just a dream, get over it." So I did. The true actor's nightmare, of course, involves being thrust on stage in the middle of a play with no idea of the plot, your lines, or your relationship to the other characters. You're forced to improvise, in other words, and that's too much like real life for some people. You see, many people seem to be uncomfortable unless they have a script to follow. For some, religious dogma supplies the script. For others, it's cultural norms. And unfortunately for some, it's the ravings of a strongman leader. Maybe it's this longing for direction that creates the anxiety which brings on the nightmare in the first place, and why it's not limited to the profession that bears its name. In any case, very few of us, if any, are immune to these disturbing phantasmagorias that come creeping in the wee small hours to trouble our sleep. As nightmares go, the actor's variety is on the low end of the anxiety scale, generally more embarrassing or frustrating than scary. Other nightmares, though, are much darker, bringing visions so terrifying we snap awake in a fop sweat, afraid to move, or sit bolt upright in bed with a scream and then fall back and lie there in a state of hyper-consciousness until exhaustion claims us or the rosy glow of dawn brings relief. I've only had a few of those, but they were bad enough. I have a great deal of sympathy for anyone who's routinely plagued by them. But far worse than even the scariest nighttime fancy is being fully awake and watching something awful approaching while feeling powerless to prevent it, a waking nightmare. The Vietnam War was one. I was very young when it started, so I recognized its nightmarish inevitability only in retrospect. It first appeared like a distant wave on the horizon. Just a few military advisors sent to a small Southeast Asian country. No big deal, right? Then the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which may not even have happened at all, provided the justification for escalation, and the small wave quickly became a nightmarish tsunami rushing toward us. The onrushing tide swept away many in my generation and left others severely damaged, physically, mentally, or emotionally, sometimes all three, while only gently lapping at the toes of others. But everyone was affected in some way. The waking nightmare that was Vietnam opened a rift in the soul of our country that never really healed. The drumbeat for war after 9/11 was another waking nightmare, fueled by lies, a thirst for revenge, and a lust for profit, and fanned by a complicit media tailored especially for that purpose. This morally repugnant invasion of a country not even involved in the destruction of the Twin Towers hoovered up a new generation and sent them off to be ground up and spit out by the war machine. The latest waking nightmare has been the regrettable rise of Donald Trump, a festering bag of bile with a ridiculous hairdo and an inept spray tan, elevated to icon status by the foolish, the self-interested, and the simply evil. This bully will fall, I feel confident, but a seed he did not plant but watered and fertilized is starting to grow. Back in 1982, while browsing in a bookstore, of course, I came across the book Holy Terror by Flo Conway and Jim Siegelman. The book acquainted me with the threat of Christian nationalism, a scary movement that was in its infancy back then, but it's had 42 years to mature and grow like toxic mold in a crawl space. The authors have recently updated the book if you want to check it out. Seeking to control the 7 mountains of influence in civic life, which include government, education, the arts and entertainment, media, religion, family, and business, these deluded individuals go by many names: Dominionist, Christian Reconstructionist, the New Apostolic Reformation, Kingdom Now theology, Roman Catholic integralism. But for brevity's sake, we can lump them all together under the general heading of Christian nationalism. They aim to see only religious extremists in positions of power and the Constitution replaced with Old Testament rules and penalties. They want us to forget the church was a co-equal conspirator with despotism for a millennium during the time we now call the Dark Ages. They want us to forget how Catholics and Protestants ravaged Europe for ages with their battles and bloodshed, leaving no country unscathed by their mutual brutality. They want us to forget how the Puritans brought their extreme beliefs with them to the Massachusetts Bay Colony, where they imprisoned and executed many of their own for the ridiculous charge of witchcraft. Or how Klan lynch mobs who spread death and terror on Saturday night filled the pews on Sunday morning where a complicit clergy called them righteous. They want us not to notice one of their own is now in charge of the House of Representatives, while others have lifetime appointments to the Supreme Court. Everyone needs to start paying attention right now, or we may soon find ourselves living in a nightmare from which there is no awakening.